Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the House of Common show. We are so glad that you are with us. With us, we have Stefan, we have O'Shea, we have Calvin, we have Kareem, we have Jones, we have Adam, we have Tim, we have Jason, we have Bart. All the boys are here, willing to hang out together and willing to hang out with you. You can hang out with us on YouTube. Search for the words House of Common show, and then when you find any of our videos, make sure to like every video that you see. Make comments on every video that you watch, and then subscribe to the channel, and then share that with everybody else that you know so that they can watch, like, subscribe, and share as well. If you enjoy podcasts, we're there as well. Apple Podcasts and Spotify, make sure to subscribe to our podcast and then leave reviews and comments wherever you can, because we would love to know how we're doing so that we can be the better show for you, the neighbors of the house. If you have watched the news recently in the last month or so since the murder of George Floyd, you would see the resurgence, if you will, of the Black Lives Matter slogan, the hashtag, and the movement. This is something that has been in the foray of modern time. It's since 2012, since the death and the acquittal of Trayvon Martin and the acquittal of George Zimmerman in 2013. The hashtag Black Lives Matter was born, and subsequently after the hashtag became the movement that was titled Black Lives Matter as well, something that was a part of the 2016 elections, something that has been a part of the vernacular of modern times now. And as you've seen on Facebook, on social media, there's been the battle between the idea of Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter, even though if all lives, anyhow, you know where I'm going with this. And so we want to do as the house is we want to talk about the idea of the slogan and the movement Black Lives Matter, because a lot of times this gets asked of us. What are our thoughts about the term Black Lives Matter? What do we believe Black Lives Matter means? And then how do we go about being black men, whether we support the slogan, whether we support the movement or not? And so the gentlemen, conversation is into the house. Jason, you are our resident United Statesian. Even though you are living out here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
We claim you.
American?
I asked Chase, it's just American.
Thank you, O'Shea.
It's all good.
These are my closest friends. Jason, you were in the States for the Trayvon Martin trial, subsequently Michael Brown, and so many others, which is such an unfortunate thing to say, so many others. And you've seen the rise of the Black Lives Matter slogan and the movement. You've also seen a lot of the backlash that they have experienced as well, based on some of their views in their charter, based on how they're viewed in the media, and based on how they talk about themselves. So talk us through a little bit about, your thoughts on the slogan and your thoughts on the movement Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, so to me, the movement was long overdue because Black lives do matter. Obviously, all lives matter, but if Black lives, if we weren't persecuted and if we weren't, people getting gunned down the streets and weren't a part of systemic racism, we wouldn't even have this type of discussion. And I think the reason why it's important that Black Lives Matter, not necessarily the hashtag or the organization, is because me speaking for many African Americans, I would say in 1976, America didn't help us. In 1863, America didn't get the job done. In 1918, same thing. In 1945, America did not get the job done. In 2008, even with Obama becoming president, America did not get the job done. And so we're back now in 2020, and unfortunately, we still have this issue that Black lives do seem like they don't matter from the systems that have been put up. And so, yes, this movement needs to happen. It should happen. But obviously, some of the views might be different. Even talking to some white Americans, some of their views of defunding the police and, and so forth are kind of threatening or may even seem scary. But I think that their intentions are good. Now, as far as me personally, I don't really use the hashtag, only because even though Black Lives Matter is a very new organization, you have organizations like the NAACP and Urban League who have definitely supported African Americans, have been really much the main organizations that have helped to fight for equality for over 100 years, aren't really getting that much, shine in this time. But, they were the ones who've been here all along, who have pushed and promoted for equality and also for strengthening the actual Black community. So, with all that being said, I'm glad that this is happening, but with the organization not necessarily being centralized, I think that might have an issue, but that might be a good thing as well for right now.
Yeah, I 100% agree, Jason. The cause is alive and well still, because we need to fight against injustice and fight for the injustice against specific Black people. Among other people, I understand that. But what seems to happen a lot of times is against Black people. That's why that started. But the organization is, I think, a direct result of lack of leadership, leadership, the lack thereof, and poor organizational skills. An organization that has so many chapters, and every chapter basically operates onto their own and does not have a charter or any type of structure in the sense of beliefs. So what ends up happening is people can attach it to whatever cause that they see fit. And this is where it becomes problematic. This is why I stopped using the Black Lives Matter hashtag, because people have taken that and they've added to it what the original intent was not there. So when you hear on social media and you hear in news outlets, they consider protesters, rioters, and looters all a part of Black Lives Matter. They consider all types of protests that are happening in Canada, in the US, and around the world as Black Lives Matter. And I know that there were other forces at play within those events, and those were not all Black Lives Matter organized or sanctioned events. So as an entity, as an organization, they have a lot. I don't know if they can even recover for it. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit later. There are so many problems now with what they have aligned themselves with that you don't really get a sense of real purpose. Sometimes doing less and doing it better is better than trying to do all the things in the name of goodness. I think you get lost in that. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, with the organization Black Lives Matter, it's like their greatest benefit is their hugest liability. When we look at civil rights movements, especially for Black people in the States, it's like they were centered around a lightning rod figure, whether it be Malcolm X or Martin Luther King Jr. It was one of those things that they were the thing that centered and brought everything together. The whole struggle, though, was that the moment that they were taken out, the movement still went on, but it lost its that level of momentum, that's driving force behind it. So the brilliance of it is that there are pockets all over the place that are kind of semi-autonomous, which is also its biggest liability. I know for me, it's the term Black Lives Matter. It's like I am still behind it as far as what it stands for, because I would like to say that my life does matter. When I look at the chat, that every one of my brothers here, that their lives matter, and that every person that shares my racial category, which is problematic within itself, that their lives matter. But it's as far as an organization is concerned, it's almost like they have moved from being something that is focused to someone with a machine gun walking into a dark room and just spraying the bullets, hoping that they will achieve what they are looking for, without any real aim or focus.
So then the question is, I think we would all agree that, and just let's talk a little bit about how this thing started. Trayvon Martin is killed by George Zimmerman. Everyone kind of thinks, okay, well, George Zimmerman could go to jail because this is ridiculous. He is then acquitted for this crime, and a hashtag is created. My Life Matters, Black Lives Matter. And the hashtag is born out of someone's lament. It becomes, like we've all tried at different points in time to create a hashtag that catches. This was one of those that caught on, almost by happenstance. And I often think that, we've all been aware of the NAACP and other movements across North America, both in the United States and in Canada, that have done amazing work for the Black community, whether it is in helping with schooling and education, whether it's helping in curbing Black-on-Black violence. It's important to mention that there are organizations that work tirelessly to curb and end Black-on-Black violence, because there's some people who don't think that actually exists. Whether it's in housing or in finances, there are organizations that do this. But like it was said, they kind of just jumped in and they became the movement with clout in a very short span of time. They've only really been around for 7-8 years. But we would also know that when we've seen this on our own Facebook walls, we've seen this on other people's Facebook walls and on Twitter and on Instagram, and for those of us who are on TikTok and different things like that, there's a conversation that's constantly about, well, it was mentioned, like Bar mentioned it before. Well, if there is a car that's broken into, well, Black Lives Matter organize that. If this happened, Black Lives Matter organize that. Or now, if there is a shooting that happens in Chicago, the question that's actually asked boldly is, well, where is Black Lives Matter now when black lives are being taken? So there's a whole bunch of different things that are happening all at the same time, and yet this movement still has come up because there was a gap, there was something missing. So we're going to start with Kareem. If you were able to help say and bring some clarity, or help bring a little bit of, here's what you guys need to do next, what would you be telling the decentralized leaders it is what it is. Like, what would you be telling them? Here's what you should be fixing. Here's what you should be moving forward in.
Well, first, I'll address what we based on the stuff that's been happening, stuff that I wouldn't do. So I wouldn't be bringing attention to stuff like taking down statues of Jesus because of where that comes from. Even though there is some truth and validity to what's being said, I wouldn't be going around. For those that, I'm not saying that they're like predominant individuals who are for the cause have been for, but the rioting and all that stuff, I wouldn't be for that. But what I would be doing would be addressing some of the things that lead to the stereotypes that we do kind of push as a culture. And so if we're going to go extreme with tearing down statues, I would actually even think about going extreme with saying, people that are in media, let's not portray these same stereotypes that have been existing for people of color for many, many years. Let's say we're going to boycott putting anything out in the media where it perpetuates these images of seeing Black people in a negative light. That'd be one thing. I would also, if I was a part of it, really look into the systemic issues that are prevalent within society, such as the education systems, such as just the systemic oppression that's in certain areas or communities within society, and look to actually first see what those issues are and then address them. But the whole thing is, if we're going to do it, there has to be leadership to it. And it can't be a whole bunch of different individuals trying to do all different types of things. We all have to get some sort of vision to get in coming together and move forward together, as opposed to working separately.
Yeah, before I give any recommendations, and I don't have many, I'd actually like to commend the movement. We have witnessed and participated in the greatest civil rights movement in the history of the world.
Wow, yeah.
Because of a hashtag. When you think about every single state
That's crazy.
is still continuing to protest, countries around the world have joined into our cry that we matter. They did that without centralized organization or leadership. They did that without all the things that we may bring forward and say, you need to have this. And so I would say, keep going. You did what you did, and you did it because no one else was. What I would say is figure out who you can partner with next for the next phase. I don't think Black Lives Matter, the movement, actually has to change. They've been demonized and discredited, not just by whites, but by us. The reason why it's taken so long to see some of the movement move the way that it has is because we didn't get on it 7 years ago when it was necessary. We as leaders didn't use our voices. We didn't befriend them. We didn't say, I'm available. And so in a lot of the frustrations that we have seen at the different rallies and protests, the lack of organization, the lack of a voice of reason even, is because we're absent, and we have been absent. And they've done the best that they could do with what they had. And again, largest civil rights movement in the history of the world. I think that it is for the other agencies that exist and need to exist to show up and partner. The demolition team can't be the person or the group of people that rebuild the house. And I think we have to look at it that way. They've done exactly what they needed to do, and we need to figure out how to come alongside of that and build from the ground up.
I like I think when we talk about this, and a lot of issues sort of similar, we sort of have to look at it because Black Lives Matter, well, yes, it is an international movement. We see a lot more of Black Lives Matter in the States, that movement. And Black Lives Matter Toronto, I'm not a fan of just some of the actions. I obviously, like everybody else, I support the hashtag. I think what we can do next as far as Black Lives Matter Toronto is start to actually organize and start to get back to, okay, why was this started? What is the original spirit of Black Lives Matter, and how can we continue on in that same spirit? I think that finding someone who could be, I don't know, president, CEO, or whatever, chief black person, like whatever it is finding that person who could say, I am going to click on the leap and I'm going to say, we're going to engage our community, and how can we better our community and make sure that the next time someone complains about, Black Lives Matter not being at a black on black shooting, we are there. We're going to have black lawyers. We're going to have all sorts of black professionals helping other black people get up and come up and get out of that mindset of, oh, woe is me. Because, I'm tired of hearing people complain about Black Lives Matter in the sense that they don't like the fact that there's a slogan. But those are the people who have a problem with, actually, you know what? I'm going to take that back because there's going to be a hot take that needs to be edited out. I think that in order to build for the future, we need to begin to organize and get voices involved that carry a lot of weight.
NASCAR.
Someone definitely just got shot.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep, there it is. I'm done.
But let me say this. Sometimes the most effective voices are the ones that don't initially carry any weight. Because Fair. when we look at it, it's like I'm just falling back onto history. MLK, before the civil rights movement, was just a black preacher that was looking to get a church, preach the gospel, and then he himself decided that he needed to act. He didn't go, I am going to be bringing it forward to this age. It's like, I'm going to be TikTok famous or famous on Instagram or anything like that. He was like, from what he knows from reading scripture, that the life that is being lived right now and that is being carried forward in his country doesn't match, and he needs to act. So I would say that it's something that it doesn't require people of major influence, because if we are waiting for people of major influence to act, change may never happen. Because for them, what ends up happening is that they are a lot of times, not always, and that's one of the encouraging things to see of this whole civil rights shift and movement, is that for a lot of them, they are more concerned about their platform and what it'll cost them than by taking the risk. And so there is one of those things that when you get into a fight, nothing is more scary than fighting someone that has nothing to lose, and they are still willing and ready to fight you because they got nothing left but their life. So it's one of those things that I would say for us, and I would say for Black Lives Matter as an organization, it is to be able to focus that. That itself is the big thing, and it's one of those things that they will either come or they won't, for those that have power and influence. But some of the greatest revolutions are started by the guys and girls that have nothing left to lose.
Yeah, and even kind of just adding to what Tim was saying, if you think about it, Jesus said, you know, the person who's going to be the greatest among you, that's your servant. That's the person who's going to grind, the person who's going to step up, the person who's going to put in the information and who's going to organize. And that's what Martin Luther King did. I mean, he also was a great speaker, but the reality is that, you know, this movement, other movements eventually at some point need certain leaders, certain people to step up so that we can exactly get the point across and speak to the equality that needs to happen. And which is great is the fact that many revolutions were started and they did happen by groups of people, whether that be in France or wherever, India or whatever. I mean, there were always people there, but then at some point the leaders need to sit down at the table and kind of just organize things and put it together. And obviously, unfortunately, Martin Luther King, he paid with his life. And I think even to this point now in 2020, maybe that's why we haven't had any strong Black leader like a Martin Luther King or Frederick Douglass, because MLK, he paid with his life. And even to the point he knew, even when he had his speech, he pretty much said, hey, you know, I'm at the mountaintop, and people, and me being a preacher, I'm thinking, hey, you know what, this guy knows, okay, his time is almost up. And so he was willing to pay that price. And many people are willing to step up and pay that price and walk in those shoes and take that type of, and take this movement to that next level. But I mean, there might be.
Yeah. I mean, did you guys like go to the Black Lives Matter website?
Yeah.
You guys check it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it's all there, like in terms of, there is a level of organization that they have. The problem is that the vision lacks clarity and it's too diverse. So you have a number of people who will get down with anti-racism, but who are still on the fence about gender equality, which is roped into the Black Lives Matter vision. You have people who essentially are again anti-racist, but who get roped into, who are I guess less down with the grandierness of the vision. And this is the problem, is that you guys have been saying, is that like there's vision there are leaders there, but it lacks a focus, it lacks a pointedness. It's like they're trying to shoot a shotgun when really at this time we need a rifle. And I just sense that, you know, Calvin, I really love what you said in terms of like the demo crew is not the same, is not the rental crew. You know what I mean? And I commend Black Lives Matter for where they have gone thus far. But they need a more pointed vision. Simply put, they need a more pointed vision, and they need in terms of direction and actions, they need essentially they can leave nothing up to interpretation. This is the largest, as said before, the largest civil rights movement in the history of our world, and it needs there can be no misinterpretation of where things are going next. And I hope that if the Black Lives Matter leaders, are hearing this, whoever is in power and at play, you need to know, because the strength of this is really resting on it. The other thing that I wanted to add that wasn't added here was the fact that none of us have actually spoken about the direct opposition there is to divide Black Lives Matter and to sow different narratives. And I think that is something that we need to understand, is that there are a lot of people, both hidden and visible, who are trying to sow dissent into understanding that Black Lives Matter is not as organized or is not as powerful or is associated with the looters. And this goes on all levels. Remember that racism is still alive and well, right? On all levels of leadership in both of our countries, in Canada and the States, racism is alive and well. And this trickles into the media, the things that we consume, and it actually does influence. It influences the way that we see one another. We see this movement and stuff. And so we have to understand that, like, the benefit of Martin Luther King was there wasn't such a pervasive, there was still opposition, but there wasn't such a pervasive way of getting information out there and sowing dissent. And so they have to understand that they're playing in a new game. They're playing in a new era, and the same tools that they use to get a message out there and to be decentralized and to communicate on the fly are the same tools that the enemy of Black Lives Matter will use to divide them.
Right. That's a good point.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly in terms of in what Cal has already said and what you're saying, Adam, that we do have to honor what they've been able to do in terms of initiating the greatest civil rights movement in the history of our world. But where I really would like to encourage, and this is me speaking directly to those that are pushing this movement, would be taking some time really to address all the narratives that have got us to where we are, and not the ones that are not going to necessarily bring change. Like, don't go from a place of just anger and actually go from a place of actually getting to the root cause of different things that are going on. And then understand this is not going to be something we're going to fix within the next 5 to 10 years. This is something that we got to think through. In order to break down the systems, we got to be strategic in saying we want to empower people of color to get into all different spheres of influence and building out something from generations to generation. So speaking from the generation that we have present right now, the young people coming up now, and being able to somehow come up with narratives and conversations to help them to think of how do we actually infiltrate all the different spheres of influence and actually putting some sort of thrust to getting that to happen. Because here's we keep hearing stuff where it's almost like it's Band-Aid solutions, or even the idea of how Black Lives Matters came into fruition was in response to something that happens, and everything seems to be in response. We're reacting rather than being proactive and saying, how do we strategically tear down this whole thing and build it back up? And the only way we're going to be able to do that is if we actually get people of influence who are for the idea that Black Lives Matter, which then moves on to even, people have been complaining all lives matter, so that we can get to a place where there is no racism. Now, I know that's a big and lofty goal or desire to have. But again, with that being the case, and the only way we're going to do this if we actually get extremely strategic in terms of how do we tear down this whole thing down in a strategic way where it's not Band-Aid solutions.
I think I would only add to this conversation by looking backwards a little bit to look forwards. So the civil rights movement that we are most familiar with, all of us as viewers, is the civil rights movement where Martin Luther King was a major voice in the 1950s and 60s. And there was strategy involved. There was centralized leadership, but there wasn't necessarily a president, a CEO, and things of that sort. But they were spokespeople. There were voices a part of it. And they had strategic ideas when it came to walking and crossing bridges, when it came to sit-ins in restaurants, when it came to not riding on buses. There was strategy involved, and they had an end goal in mind. the end goal was making sure, even to the point of making sure that they got on the news, to make sure that people were able to see people being hit with fire hoses, or children being attacked by police dogs, to make sure that got on the news so that more people were able to see there was a strategy involved. Bart says this all the time: it's chess, not checkers. Yep. And the civil rights movement of that time played chess, and they played chess well. They played chess so well that someone thought the best way to do it would be to actually take lives. That's how well they were playing it. That's how much it was moving. And we even forget that prior to all of this, there was a young boy by the name of Emmett Till. Emmett Till, at a young age, is sitting on the stairs, and the story is that a white woman passed by him, and apparently he whistled. Later that night, he is taken out of the home of a family member where he was visiting. He is beaten. He is shot. They tie a rock to him, and they put him in the water. His face expands. He dies. And his mother, knowing, again, chess, not checkers, she makes sure that his casket is open, not closed, so that everybody can see what these horrible men did to their son, on the words of somebody who falsely accused him. As we learned on her deathbed, she said that she made the entire thing up. But that was a spark. That moment of seeing chess, not checkers, was a spark. This young child whose life was taken for a lie. There was strategy. And so the one thing I would say to echo my brothers as we get ready to close this day, to those who are organizers, because the world is watching you, and because there are people who want you to fail. Well, let's not get it twisted, gentlemen. There is a pocket of the world that wants this movement to fail, who wants this movement to stop, because the way that life has been is good enough for them, and they want you to fail. Swing hard, swing true, but don't just swing randomly. Swing at something tangible, because they are going to come at every opportunity that they have to say, this is why you're wrong. This is why you don't care about black people. You don't care about this. You don't care about that. Have an answer. Have a reason, have a strategy, have a spokesperson, have a voice who's able to say, this is who we are. Because if not, then anybody who says anything and possibly wears a Black Lives Matter t-shirt can represent you. And if that's not who you've chosen, then that's all that there is. So we appreciate the work that you've done, and shout outs to the 3 black women who were the catalysts of this Black Lives Matter movement. Salute to you, queens.
Right.
This has been the House of Common show.